So there's a lot of crossover between how we think about great truthful acting and connecting to the other character on stage, and how we think about public speaking, which is really about connecting with the audience and trying to change something within them. So it's never about me, it's always about what I'm trying to change in you. And so what I'm most interested in is the truth of an actor's performance. I think some people would criticize actors to say, oh, they're not transformative. And that is definitely a skill, and it's something that you can develop, and it's something that certain people perhaps have more of an inclination for. But I don't think that that's what makes you a good or bad actor, is being able to be totally transformative. I think what I'm looking for in a good performance for an actor, but also in a great presentation, is that you're truthful. And so you can be truthful and sing opera, and you can and do any kind of style. So it's not about being naturalistic, because again, the style, you can be performing any kind of more, less naturalistic style, which is, but find the truth in that performance. And that's what I think is really important. And that, I have to tell you that my philosophy has been, both when I'm working with, professional actors on Broadway, or I'm working with a freshman in at Harvard or at Cornell, anybody can be a decent actor. Anybody can be a decent actor. Not everybody can be a great actor. And I think you'd probably agree that that's true with public speaking, that anybody can be a decent public speaker, but not everyone's going to be a fantastic public speaker. And I think that it has to do with something that we don't talk enough about when we have discussions around performance, or performance being either acting or public speaking, which is truth. And I want to dig into that word a little bit, because that sounds like a very grand word that we can use in many different ways. But what I mean by that is that when you are inhabiting a role, it's not about me and how I sound and how I look. What I am always most focused on is, what am I trying to change in you, the other character on stage? So it's about objective. So I thought I'm on, so I thought I'd use it. Sure. There's three things that we think about. These are the most important things. It's who is your audience? And for us, when we're thinking about that as an actor, it's who's the other character, right? Who's the other character on stage with us? And what is my objective? So I'm not thinking about emoting. I always, my acting students, it drives them a little bit crazy, because I tell them, I don't want to hear about emotions. I don't want to hear that word. I don't want to hear sad, angry. I don't want those things named. We don't play emotions. We play objectives. And the emotions are a kind of symptom that arise from that. Okay. So let me explain that. If I am trying, children are very good at showing us how to act well. So if my son, and I have brought him to acting classes with me and rehearsals, let's say, particularly when he was even smaller, that he wants to get a lollipop. And you have kids, so you know that's his objective. I need to get the lollipop that you're holding. I need to persuade you somehow to give it to me. Now, what are the different tactics that I start using if I need to get that lollipop? Because they might try to distract you and grab it. They might cry. They might try to charm you. They might try to threaten you. So there's all kinds of very active verbs that we can use. And those active verbs always need to be about the other person. Or in the case of public speaking, they always need to be about the audience. It's persuasive speaking. What am I trying to change in you? And the tactics, so there's a lot of crossover between how we think about great truthful acting and connecting to the other character on stage, and how we think about public speaking, which is really about connecting with the audience and trying to change something within them. So it's never about me, it's always about what I'm trying to change in you. And that is why I think, when we have people who are telling us, use your hands in this way, or you have to move in this way, or they're kind of prescriptive about what good public speaking looks like. I find that I never would want to do that, to make the actors or the speakers that I work with feel self-conscious. I've had the pleasure of working with many amazing speakers, and there's one speaker that I worked with, Peter Gomes. He was the professor of Christian morals at Harvard University and a wonderful preacher. He has since passed away, but he was a big influence for me, and I was able to observe his preaching classes. Now, when you think about speakers who it's not about them, it's about their audience, I think preachers are a wonderful example. And it doesn't matter what your religious beliefs are. I think they're very good people to watch in terms of public speaking. He used to say to his preaching students to say, but what do I do with my hands? What do I do with my hands? Right? And he would just tell them, let your hands relax down by your side. And when the gesture comes, they will rise. My mother was just terrified of public speaking. And she was an immigrant. She came to the US when she was 12, and they spoke German and Hebrew at home, and she never really felt comfortable in English. And so she swore that when she had children, she didn't want us to feel uncomfortable in front of people. So she sent us to acting classes. We went, I think my brother was probably around 8, I was probably around 7. So I've been on the stage for a very long time, and I was in a children's performing group, and I performed every week. But I have mixed feelings about sending my own children to certain acting classes, because I think there's different kinds of acting classes. There's very commercialized acting classes that produce a very performative kind of actor. And then there's other kinds of acting classes. And that was a lot of what I happened to have done. I don't know if my mother knew that this was the best way to go. And that was that I did a lot of comedy and improvisation. And I did a lot of musical theater too, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I think the thing that was most influential on me was doing improvisation as a type of performance. Because again, when you're doing improvisation, you have to be in the moment, and you have to be focused on what you're trying to change in the other person, as opposed to trying to get a certain look or to move in a certain way. So that was. I'm very grateful to my mother that she did that. And I do think that if you can find a good acting class, I totally recommend, and definitely to adults, go take an improv class. It's very good for us.
Yeah, that was my question. It doesn't have to be in order, but do you recommend that adults of any age, could they benefit? Besides that, it's just maybe fun and social, but is there some benefit from taking an acting class, or maybe even getting involved, getting a part, in a local play in a small town?
Yeah, I think there is. And again, I think if you want to try to find a group that is going to offer you not something that's just about memorizing lines and saying them in a certain way, but actually that the focus of the performance is about the interaction. And so I would recommend 2 things. The first thing I would recommend is see if there's an improv group in your area. I have a very dear friend of our family, Irving Wardle, who is a well-known theater critic here in the UK. He is 90 years old, and he goes to an improvisation group. I think they were even doing that online in some form over the pandemic. And this is very important. It's fun. It's a great part of his life. It's social. And it isn't about being perfect or just being completely memorized. It's about making that argument for your character and connecting with others. That's what's important. The other thing is that there's two things that you need to be working on if you would like to really be a truthful performer, which is what I consider to be a good performer. And that is that the other element is that you need to have a voice and body that responds spontaneously when you want it to. And so I do actually recommend, and I am very much a voice and speech coach, I do recommend taking voice classes.
Mm.
I'm a director and a director who is very invested in voice and speech and text. So when we have to work on our instrument. We're not going to be, if you come from my family, you probably are going to be naturally very loud, but not everybody is just kind of used to using their voice in a certain way that's more public. We have a lot of challenges around clear enunciation. So your speech should be so clear that it is effortless for your audience to understand you, because if they have to strain to understand you, you actually wear them out and you lose them. And so I do recommend those two things, the intense spontaneity and connection of improvisation and this quite rigorous training in how to use your voice and how to really work with text. And when we bring those two things together, that's magic.
How can we get better? What are a couple of tips that can help everyone get better?
It's really interesting that even some of the best speakers or performers can suddenly lapse into bad habits. And that's because they're not directing their energy outwards, right? The energy falls back down. I would say that a lot of people do not support their voice. So they are running out of air. They're going into a bit of glottal fry, right?
Is that an American thing, especially the fry?
There's a lot of fry with American actors, but I've seen it internationally as well. So there's a lack of support. There's also, when you're teaching a voice class, it's funny because the first thing we do is we really teach folks how to breathe. And while people are going to come into your class, they say, well, I know how to breathe. I've been alive for X number of years. But actually, when we put ourselves on stage, that's quite a terrifying situation, quite frankly, or in front of the camera. And we can talk about that in a minute. And so what we have to do is we have to actually gain technique so that when we're in a public situation, we can kick that technique in and we can make sure that we're supporting our voices. Because listen, you can trick people, really anybody, into being fantastically expressive speakers. So if we think about, we'll do exercises around, if you are telling this story to a group of kindergartners, to a group of nursery children, and pretend like this is your audience, or bring real children in to be an audience. Suddenly people are more expressive. They're using a dynamic pitch range. They're over enunciating, or I'll take students out into, a giant field or a huge space across a courtyard. And I'll ask them to get somebody to pick up a particular object in the corner, yell at them to do that. And all of a sudden they open their mouths and they're directing their energy outward again. And so that really is the trick, is we can all be expressive. We all do it in our daily lives. But the question is, how do we get that on stage? Look, the truth of the matter is that the only way to get good at this is to do it over and over again and to fail a lot when you first start. So I think that it's tough. The fearlessness of getting up again and again to speak in public is what really helps. But to be really frank with you, unless you're pushed into having to do that, most people will avoid it. And I totally understand that. So I think, one of my colleagues at mmhmm has said that, she intentionally puts herself, and I've been doing this too, by the way, I have to say, volunteering to make recordings when I really don't want to, because I find it incredibly stressful. But I say, I'm going to do this because that is the way that I get better at, this new format. This is a very new format for me. I'm a theater person, and I've really been focusing on the live. So I've, now I'm in a situation where I have to make videos all the time. And that's probably 50% of it, Gar, is just doing it.
Yeah. Well, that's what I always tell everybody. If you look at all the really good YouTubers, those who are polished now and produce good stuff, then go back and look at their old videos from 8 years ago or 5 years. Some are 10. There's one woman who's got about 4 million followers, really good stuff. And I went back to look at 10 years ago, and it was awful. It was it was rubbish, and she just would look at that and improve herself by, she just developed it, and now it's wonderful. And I've seen that just repeated, and all the YouTubers say that. Look, you've got your first 100 videos are just they're not gonna be great.
The thing is that it's really, look, I've worked with so many different people over the years, and people have real terrifying symptoms to public speaking. I've worked with people who throw up, like they have to leave, or they'll, feel like they have to vomit before going on stage. They sweat profusely. They feel dizzy. This is not a joke. People really suffer from public speaking anxiety. And I always say that's the stress and anxiety doesn't go away. And if you think there's something wrong with you, you're in good company. Most people get extremely nervous. Some people have more extreme symptoms, but most people feel very, very uncomfortable. And it's really important to go back to this issue of truth, that you find the larger reason for what you're doing. Because if you can get the attention off of yourself and onto that objective, onto the audience, and if you're, I think teaching is a great example, because you see a lot of great public speaking with teachers, because they, particularly, I think, if you're looking at teachers, in university too, but of younger children, that they're just focused on their students. So that expression is very natural. I think you've got to find the larger reason for being there.
Right. No, I think that's well put. The problem is people focus on themselves. How am I doing? Am I good enough? Am I doing this right? Rather than on, well, I'm here to help these people or to persuade them or whatever. And that's it. And if I fail, I fail. But just the act of getting it off your performance and on for the reason of being there.
You just hope that you don't have to face that. But in the meanwhile, there's the two things that we're talking about, which is get the attention off of yourself, onto your audience, find that larger truth, and at the same time, work on your technique. Yeah. Because the thing is, I had a great acting teacher when I was an undergrad at Columbia, actually, or she used to say, put it in the pot and forget about it. Because when you're training yourself physically to use your voice in a certain way, to breathe, that has to be there for you. And so your body's habit needs to be, I get on stage and my breath kicks in. And so I hope I spelled everything. I didn't spell check my slides too quickly this morning, but this is something that I talk about a lot with my students, or with actors or speakers that I'm working with, that there's stages for acquiring a skill. And the first time that we begin working on something, we're in that stage of unconscious incompetence. It means that you're not even aware that you're doing something badly. Yeah. Okay. And then the next stage is that someone like me, in a very irritating way, probably comes and says, are you aware that you're doing this with your voice, and that we can't understand you, that you're dropping the energy at the end of your sentences, that you're doing all of these different kinds of things? Are you aware of that? And then you go to this very painful state that's called, conscious incompetence. You're now aware of how bad you are, right? And then the next stage is conscious competence, which means that you are able to change this thing, but you have to think about it all the time. And it's really hard to connect with your audience when you're thinking about, your voice and how you sound. And put my earpod back in. But then there's this heavenly state called unconscious competence, meaning that you are now, you have digested that new skill and it kicks in automatically. And then you repeat this over and over again. And you're a musician, so you know exactly what this is about, right? So if someone says, oh, you're holding your hand in a certain way, like my son is a drummer too, and he lifts his stick up too much, right? And so his teacher is like, the hi-hat needs to be very close. And when he first tries to adjust that motion, it messes up his drumming. You know that stage?
Sure. No, we talk about this in all the Zen arts and the martial arts too. That it's an old thing, and in Budo and the study of these various arts is that exactly that. It's worded differently, but it's exactly that. So you want to get to that stage where you don't think about it, or learning jazz. Jazz musicians talk about this too. There's that phrase where you're getting pretty good, but you're also thinking about it. So you're not there yet. So that's why, you go to I think it's called the wood shop, chopping wood. You just go, and for Bill Evans, that did this for a few years in New York. He just went away by himself, just playing the piano for years and years. until it became more natural to do these incredible, difficult things, but it didn't feel difficult. It just becomes a language, just like speaking a foreign language, or it's just like playing music. I don't think, or a great singer. Well, most people, when they sing, they don't think about it either, right? They can scat, ba-do-ba-da-ba-do with it. You don't really think about it. But, any art or public speaking eventually, or acting, I guess, eventually you can do all those techniques without ever thinking about it.
Yeah, Stanislavski, Konstantin Stanislavski, and I was trained by Russians, and I come out of that. That legacy is he said, make the difficult doable, the doable easy, and the easy beautiful. And and then my daughter always adds, and the beautiful fun. But it's that it's that cycle that you always want to be going through, and there's no other way besides putting yourself out there, but at the same time working on breath. So if people want to take a voice class, there is a great organization called the Voice and Speech Trainers Association, VASTA, VASTA. And VASTA people are all over the world, and they offer classes in various configurations. I mean, and you can look up who might be in your area, who might be offering classes. And I think voice classes are a revelation for a lot of people, because we use our voices every day, and we don't really think about how that works and how we might be able to make it easier and more dynamic to be performing with our voice.
I think you're similar to me in this sense, in that I don't have trouble on the stage, and I've done big keynotes. I've been on MGM Grand with 5,000 people. Britney Spears was on the night before me. Different show. Oh, wow. But I didn't feel nervous at all. I don't know why. Maybe I should. I just get a kick out of it. I went in the audience an hour before and imagined how, it's fun. I don't get scared doing that. But if it's just me alone with a camera, it just takes forever, and I get so frustrated, and I'm not myself. I go, that's not me.
I know the feeling.
Why is it? What is it about a camera, and what can we do about it?
Well, I just say that I always get nervous, even with live events, and the only way for me to get over that is to really focus on my objective, focus on what I'm trying to do. But then I do enjoy it. Then I do lose myself in that moment. But now I don't. When I'm recording, I'm looking at my little camera. Now when I'm with myself recording in my room alone, I feel like the camera is like kryptonite. It sucks my energy. So if live audiences give me superpowers, the camera, I think in the beginning felt like it was draining my powers. So I've been developing different kinds of methods to deal with this. So first of all, I mean, a lot of us, when we're giving presentations, we do have an audience on Zoom. So if there's any way for you to see those people and to try to see their reactions, I feel like that for a lot of us is very important. So we can keep focused on our objective. But then a lot of us are also, we need to do recordings where there's nobody there. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, actually, the way you said that is perfect, because it's not the Zoom meetings. In fact, I did a recording with Microsoft for this event, but in a big studio. I couldn't see the audience. It was online, but I'm in a green screen, big studio. I can't see them. My wife watched it live, and she said, she's always critical, so disappointing. It's like, that's not yourself. On the other hand, like a week later, I did one with about 100 people, but through Zoom. And I was using mmhmm, and they were blown away by all this studio stuff. And it was fun. I had a great time, and they recorded it. My wife watched that and said, yeah, that's night and day difference. And so the difference is there's an audience. So the problem isn't the camera. Audience. The problem is doing it when there's no audience.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's a challenge for a lot of us. So I've been developing some very specific things that have made a huge difference for me. And they're very, very simple. The first thing is, and this is true in any presentation that you make, you've got to show it to someone else. You've got to go through a revision process, because writing is revision. And performance is revision. We have rehearsals, and we bring in, when we're doing a show, we bring in people for dress rehearsals, we bring in people for previews, because we need to know, we need an audience to perform to. So you've got, I have friends, my daughter is also an extraordinary critic. She's 12, but she's a good audience member, and my partner, and various other friends who we show each other our presentations. So I get on Zoom. I literally, last night was on Zoom with my partner. He was in the living room, and and I was sitting here and I was practicing my presentation because it reminds me of why I'm doing this. So practicing in front of real people, it puts that audience in your mind's eye, and you pronounce the words differently. You focus in a totally different way. So practicing in front of real people several times if you need to. Now there is a kind of trick, a kind of stopgap measure that I have to do less and less because I'm finding it a little bit easier as I kind of practice in front of people, and then I can do it on my own. But if you need to, get someone on Zoom when you're recording, and have just their presence is going to make a difference. So I asked a friend of mine who is a really experienced journalist, how do you work with the camera? How are you so good with the camera? And she says, well, there's always somebody in the studio. And that's just not the case for us most of the time. So either get someone in the room, practice with someone, but let your presentation breathe the real oxygen of audience.
Right. Yeah, I guess, a lot of us could stream. A lot of people are streaming. So you could try to do it streaming, just invite whoever wants to show up. I'm going to make a video. You can still edit that later, but when all those takes that you would have, at least there'd be real people to look at.
I think that the thing is this. Here's what happens when we're alone in a room and we are recording takes. The objective moves from persuading our audience to try something, to think in a different way, all of those beautiful objectives. The objective moves from that to get this perfect. And we are not going to perform well if our objective becomes get this perfect. Yeah. Because that is narcissistic. I mean, not that it's self-focused. And we want to get the attention off of ourselves and onto what we're trying to put out into the world, into our intervention.
Do you think that there are some like CEO types or leaders who could really benefit from acting classes or public speaking classes?
Oh, absolutely. And I've had different types of CEO clients in finance. I've had some that I just worked with to get them ready for a very specific event, and then I've had others who really needed to, if let's say the father of an investment company was retiring and the son really needed to step into some shoes, all kinds of long-term projects where you're trying to get someone to become a better speaker and think about public appearances in a different way. And those kind of long-term transformation processes, I'm always using acting techniques. I do think it's beneficial. If I could send them to great improvisation classes, I think they would absolutely benefit from it.
Right. Have you known someone or friends or students who have transformed themselves into, where they were kind of shy, reserved people to be more, they might still be introverts, but, they're able though to live in this very extroverted world?
I have, and I've seen that very much. And I think a lot of that does have to do with, again, finding something that they're passionate about. So suddenly they are, very excited or invested in making a particular change or in building something, and the speaking becomes easier. I think the other thing that we have to just really be honest about is that it takes us a long time to figure out who we are and what we're trying to do in this world. And that is a big part of speaking. So I've seen the transformation happen when you really see, I've seen this with, young scholars a lot, or with, anyone who you're seeing a kind of transformation over a couple of years where they are getting exposure, they are working on technique, and they're finding their direction. That's transformative. I think the other thing that is really helpful to think about is you're allowed to build a public persona. You're allowed to think about, this is me when I'm doing public speaking, which may not be exactly the person that I am with friends and family or in more intimate situations. And that kind of building a public persona is oftentimes also very helpful for people, because it allows you to kind of to do things in a way that you wouldn't normally do them, to be to use your voice in a more grand way or a more expressive way. So developing a persona is something that I work a lot on. And so some of the most transformative exercises that help both with actors and with clients in different sectors are emulations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll have someone say, who do you think is the most amazing, actor or public figure? And I will actually work very hard with them on doing an emulation of that speech. Right.
Right.
So, for example, I have had students who have emulated Martin Luther King, of course, or who have emulated, the comedian Bill Hader. They actually memorize the speech and perform it they try to emulate the way that person is doing it. And then suddenly they figure out, oh, I didn't know I could use my voice in this way, or I didn't know how fun this could be. And then I'm not telling them go out into the world and pretend to be that person, but take the tools that you have gained from that emulation and you're allowed to use them in your public persona.
Oh, interesting. Right?
So if opening your mouth more is something that you suddenly found yourself doing in this emulation, or if elongating your vowels was something that you thought was, not for you. Okay. Right? Okay. So gaining those kind of emulation tools. Emulation is very powerful.
Interesting. I was just trying to think of who would I emulate, or who's someone I like to listen to. And Ken Burns, Ken Burns, the filmmaker, when he's on stage, he's very average. I think he's, public speaking. He did a Stanford commencement speech, but his interviews are really good. He doesn't interview, or he doesn't do narration, I don't think, for his movies. He has a professional, but he just, I don't know. I like the way he talks. It's very thoughtful. You can tell it's what you're saying. He's not acting, or he's just being very authentic. He's very comfortable, and it comes across. I guess that's why he popped into my mind. Why would Ken Burns pop into my mind? But he's actually interesting person to watch his interviews. Anyway, interesting. So emulation. So it's okay to do that, which is a form of acting.
It's an exercise.
Yeah.
So you do it as an exercise, and then you take those tools and you put them in your toolbox so that you can expand.
We do that when we're learning music. I mean, at any age, but especially when we're young and we try to be like Jimi Hendrix or whatever. That's okay. First, you copy and you become a good whatever, and then you learn your own. You branch off. So
exactly.
Were those two different slides? Because I think when the slide came in, you shifted, right? So those are two different. Yeah, I see. That's a good technique. So that's a different actual, not just a slide. You got a different slide with a different setting because you're over here now.
Right. Exactly. I have a different slide with a different setting. And the thing that I say I feel very comfortable with is that, this software is actually very akin to how we work in the theater. We have cues and we press to the next cue. So we have lighting and sound cues, but we're performing everything live. And so I think that or pre-recording it however we wish, but we can get into a flow. And I think that's really conducive to, it's a new form. It's not theater or just pre-recorded film. But I think that the other thing I wanted to show, this is very important in terms of thinking about communication and public speaking. This is what you're trying to do with your audience. You're trying to get them to catch what you're throwing out to them. And so we think about 3 steps of throwing a ball. If you think about those 3 steps, what comes to your mind? And it's great to do this in person. It's a little more difficult right here.
Yeah.
But if I'm holding an object, the first thing I do is not throw it. The first thing I do is I actually check to see, are you ready?
Yeah, sure.
And I instinctively make eye contact with you. Then I throw out the object. But then there's a third thing that I do, which is that I actually check to see if you caught it. I made sure that it landed. And so this issue of landing points is something that people miss most often when they're speaking. We just blindly throw out points, and our objective becomes to get through this.
Get through it, yeah.
Right. And so that's the communication as dialogue is something that we need to also bring into our work, even when we're working just with ourselves in front of the camera. Are you allowing that point to land?
No, good point. I think stand-up comedians know this very well, right? I mean, they have to have the landing, and even if it's a dark room, they'll get the response, or they won't, and then they know where to go. So the good presenters are going to know if they're losing the audience, or if it's going well, or if they didn't understand. A lot of professors could benefit from that. They're good at throwing balls, sometimes checking if they're even ready, but very good at throwing balls, often not checking at all if they caught the ball before they go on to the next thing. Absolutely. That's an excellent point.
That's why I think that, like, as I said, that if you practice your presentation in front of other people before you just record it or present it, that playing catch will be part of your performance.
Yeah, no, it's excellent. Most people will understand, virtual camera, bullish on virtual camera, but why, and why not OBS, which is free and so on. So, but for some reason,
it's what we were talking about, because it's like you are someone who has a lot of experience with the magic of live audiences and live presentation, and this is a tool that allows you to bring things together with spontaneity and with flow. And move between your different points with a great deal of flexibility and versatility. And so for those of us who are wanting to combine the energy of live with the power of film, I think it's really a great tool.